Oh, guys, good, you hear? I am so excited. Guess what? I hope this isn't about your podcast again. Why, did you finally listen to it?
Da-da-da-da. 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 The Groomer Next Door production. You're listening to BYOTP Radio. Coming up next, the Groomer Next Door. The Groomer Next Door Podcast.
Dun, 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 dun.
Hi, nice to meet you. I'm everybody's friend.
Hello, Pups and Kittens, and welcome to another fun-filled episode of The Groomer Next Door. I'm your host, Chris Green. Joining me in just a minute is Kimberly Gauthier. She, in my opinion, is the godmother of biologically appropriate raw food. Which, I am actually glad you are asking me, well, what is that? Well, that brings me to the fact of the week. Barf has come to mean many things, but essentially it is the nickname for raw food diets. Barf has been said to mean biologically appropriate raw food, or bones, and raw food. But whichever meaning that you choose, it means feeding your dog or cat the raw food they were designed to eat when they lived in the wild. Continuing on, a raw dog food diet typically consists of muscle meats, often still on the bone, bones either whole or ground, organ meats such as liver and kidneys, raw eggs, vegetables like broccoli, spinach, and celery, apples or other fruit, and some dairy such as yogurt. Well, with all that said, joining us now, Kimberly Gauthier.
Oh, hello. Hold on a sec. Dad, we have a guest on the podcast.
This week on the podcast, we are very fortunate. We have somebody who is a nutrition expert. Probably, from what I've heard, is probably the leading nutrition expert from all the people that actually I've been talking to who found out that she's going to be on this week, and you know who they are. Kimberly Gauthier, if I hope I said that correctly. Did I say that correct?
You did a very good job of it.
Yeah, that is my biggest thing. I'm always worried that I say the wrong name. The way, it's just a big thing. But thank you for being on the podcast. I really appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And you know what? I told you this already, but I wanted to make sure I put it on record. I have been wanting to have you on for a long time. It has just been such a cluster of different things that have stopped, and oh boy. So I am just so happy to be able to pick your brain and just learn from you. Now, I start every episode with finding out the origin story behind how you became this superhero. So please tell us all about yourself and how you got to this point.
Well, it's quite simple. I have a dog. I have 4 dogs, actually, but one of them, Rodrigo, he is the poster dog of my blog, Keep the Tail Wagging, and he basically, from puppyhood until he was 3 years old, he had digestive issues, food intolerances, environmental allergies, chronic ear infections, rashes, yeasty skin. I mean, all these things that today I understand was due to his diet. But back then, I didn't know what was going on. My vet just kept him on round after round of antibiotics. And of course, back then, I didn't understand the damage that was doing to his gut. But today I do. But I was blogging at the time, just blogging about raising littermates. And I'd heard about raw, just things from different people. And I actually contacted Dr. Kathy Alanovi and asked her, can you just teach me about raw? I'm going to write a series of blog posts. I just want to know about this and see if this is an option for my dog. And she did. And after yet another round of antibiotics, like a week after he went off of them, he had the worst rash on his skin. And it was just like we had no idea what it was. We just could not figure it out. And that was when I called a local raw food company and got us started on raw the next week. And within 2 weeks, most of his health issues were cleared up. It was just astounding.
Wow. It's funny because, and I know you hear the same thing, and we pretty much are around the same we are around the same around people. And I said that around. We're around the same people all the time. And you know it from experience. Those people have said the same thing. They either have experienced this or they keep hearing the same thing. And it becomes this, well, okay, where are we with nutrition? Because, a lot of people are like, well, I'm going to speak it from the Midwest, where I'm at right now. I'm from originally California, so I'm a West Coaster going over to the Midwest, and I've seen it on a daily basis where people will say, well, I feed my dog, and let's just, almost kind of beep the name of the product. It might as well be a bad word. Let's just be realistic. And it's a low-quality kibble that pretends to be a high-quality kibble. Well, I've been feeding this for years, and my dad fed it, and his dad fed it. Why is it any different? Well, obviously, there's a lot of different things that have changed. I mean, we know that the ingredients have gone down because the cost, we got to keep the cost down. Well, how do we keep the cost down? Well, we just put in inferior product to make sure that we can keep the cost down. And again, we've been feeding, in a sense, raw food for decades. How many times when we were kids did we feed our dog scraps from the table? How many times did our parents say, hey, you know what, we got leftover meat. Here, we're going to give it to the dog. Well, hey, there it is, right there. So all of these different things have been a factor. And that's one of the reasons why I'm loving the idea to be able to talk to you, because I get to hear and bounce off of you all these different things and think to myself, here's where the problem is, but why is it not out there in the world? And that's where you've actually taken it to the next platform by starting your blog, which is amazing. And you did it because of your dog?
Yeah, I was just writing just random things pretty much for a couple years, and then I think I started feeding raw, and I was actually doing a blogging campaign with probably one of the most hated kibble brands on the planet. And I told myself that, it's not fair for me to just write about raw because so many people don't know about it. So many people can't feed it. And, I should write about kibble as well because it's only fair.
Right.
And plus they paid me a nice chunk of dough to do so. And so, but one of my readers emailed me and said, I don't understand why you're writing about this because don't you feed raw? I would really be interested in what you've learned since you started feeding raw. And I thought about it, and I think it was April of 2014 because I switched them in April of 2013. So April of 2014, I did it's called Blogging from A to Z. It's a challenge that, thousands of bloggers join in on. And you basically, every day of the month of April, except for Sundays, is a letter of the week. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do raw feeding from A to Z. And that's how I basically introduced this new topic. And I was terrified because I was going to lose all my readers. No one was going to be interested in what I was writing about. And it actually did happen. I lost a lot of readers, but I gained, for every person I lost, I gained 10 people.
Wow. And
over that year, my traffic increased by over 500% after I switched over because people were looking for answers. Mm-hmm. And my traffic has grown steadily ever since. And I have a raw feeding group on Facebook. I have, my Facebook page and on my YouTube channel that I'm trying to be more regular with videos. And I think social media makes things so simple because you can connect with people all around the world, compare notes. I actually had a question about the energetics of, I think, what was it, kangaroo. And so I asked my friend who's in Australia, because they feed kangaroo all the time and it's a hot meat. And I thought it was, but I wasn't 100% sure. And it's just things like that where we live in such a fantastic time right now to learn all of these things and actually sit down, and talk to people who are so much smarter than I am and, figure out how to raise a healthier dog naturally. And I just feel so lucky to share everything that I'm learning with other people.
And you source your information from experts, which is, that's, you know what, there's the key right there, where when you source it from an expert, it's like you're going right to the actual mouth. You're not making up content. You're getting it right there. And that's what I have not been able to figure out when it comes to really anything media-wise. It seems like we're just making it up. And I'm only going to talk about, when it comes to media, when it comes to advertisement, when it comes to PSAs, it's ridiculous. And I do think that it's a change which, when you think back, it's only a few years that you've actually been doing this. Yet it really is not, and I'm going to go with it's not. Even though I've talked to a lot of people that are like, well, we started this around 2001, something around that. Yes, it's about 16, 17 years really active, unless you look at like a Dr. Harvey's who's been doing it since the 1980s. But this is almost a hybrid type feeding that has proven time and time again to have many applications to help our dogs and cats. Yeah. Yet it's still so new that people they're fearful. And I will get onto why a little later because we were talking about veterinarians. But my next part to that is, now you have the podcast. You have the blog. Sorry, I'm used to always saying that word. But you have the blog. Now, I told you about how I soapbox, and it is kind of a running gag a little bit because I'm kind of notorious for this. Whenever I go into a pet store, big box store, and people have the kibble, I always have to, engage a conversation and, kind of teach them a little bit, or at least hope to. I mean, I think that they're trying to do right by their pet, and I really have grown to that belief. But I always want to know other people's soapbox moments. Do you have one outside of the blog?
Gosh, I'm always so worried about offending people. So I'm tempted to approach people, like when I see them at Costco loading up their cart with a kibble that I know is not good, or treats that I know aren't, safe. Mm-hmm. But I usually don't say anything. What I do is we have in the summertime a lot of events where, it's like outdoor dog related events, and I'll get a booth. And my best friend and I will man a booth, and she talks about essential oils, and I talk about raw feeding. And I think over the years, because I'm so passionate about this, and all my friends here locally know that the last event that we did, we stayed busy practically for the entire time, because everyone that had a dog that had issues, people would be like, go down and talk to Kimberly down at that booth down there. And we learned this last year. We were just researching, how to best advertise a booth, your banners. And instead of having a booth that just said, keep the tail wagging, where it's just like, what's that? The booth says, does your dog have allergies? Because that's always the thing that brings people to raw feeding. Their dog is allergic to something, or they think their dog is. And that's what, people come over and go like, yeah, actually, I think my dog does have allergies. And from there, I say, well, what are you feeding your dog? And talk about ingredients. Are you interested in raw feeding? Would you like me to tell you how I make my dog's food? And if they're not prepared for raw feeding or comfortable with it, I tell them things that they can do to make the kibble that they feed healthier. And, and it's just a way of talking to them in a way that doesn't make them defensive, because like you said, people are trying to do their best. And when you tell someone that they're not doing their dog the service, when people say things like, well, you're just killing your dog. And it's just like, that's immediately going to put people on the defensive.
Oh, yeah.
And, so it's like I try and find a way to just move the conversation on. And I find that, for me, when I first discovered raw feeding, I wasn't ready to jump into raw feeding. I was sort of like, well, is it something that I can add to the kibble? Is it, so it's like everyone has their baby steps, and it's just one of those where you just slowly lead them along. Mm-hmm. And as people see an improvement, they'll want to know more. And then they see an improvement, they'll want to know more. And eventually I get them into one of my workshops, and I just show them, this is what I do. This is why I do it. This is how easy it is. And especially I live in the Pacific Northwest. We actually have a raw food co-op here where a group of raw feeders make orders together. So since we're buying in bulk, we can buy at a discount, which makes raw feeding a lot more affordable. So it's just a matter of just getting that information out there, giving them a business card so they can come over to my website and subscribe to my newsletter and just start that conversation. And I find that the more they hear about it and start getting used to it, it just slowly knocks away, chips away the fears that they have about switching their dog's diet.
But see, it's still a good platform. I mean, I would never want to go up to somebody and say, you're killing your dog. It reminds me too much. And I've said this so many times on the podcast, I don't eat meat anymore. And it wasn't because of anything besides the fact that the farms were actually abusing the animals and shooting them up with hormones, and I didn't like that concept. Either one. They were both terrible to me. And to actually advocate for animals, I couldn't, in good conscience, eat meat knowing that animal suffered for me to have a meal.
Yeah.
But, it's like I have that conversation as well with people. It's like, well, do you know where your food's coming from? And it even goes down to a restaurant. Do you know what their kitchen is like? It seems like these are all the same questions that I'm asking people when it comes to about what are you feeding your pet? Because it does happen on a daily basis. Somebody said, hey, my dog has really bad allergies. Again, as you said, what do we always say? What are you feeding your pet? And it's always, and again, there's that bad word, so beep, the name of the company, and you're just like, oh, gosh.
Exactly.
Do you ever get this, and this is something that I face on another continent, where people will ask you something, and they'll say, hey, I got this problem. And then you go into, the spiel of, what do you feed your pet? And, well, have you tried this? And then all of a sudden they kind of detach from the conversation and almost kind of want to leave. They're like, oh, yeah, okay, that's great. Do you get that a lot?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's so funny because you know it's coming because especially the people are like, well, I feed this and I got it from my vet and it's really working.
Oh,
and it's
boy.
like they immediately go on the defense of it. I'm just sort of like, prescription foods are Band-Aids. You're not actually fixing the problem. You're just sort of putting a Band-Aid over it. You need to heal the dog. And so what I'm proposing is something that you can do to actually heal your dog. I mean, it's funny because, I'm learning this along with everyone else, and I've been feeding raw for over 4 years, but just this year have I replaced most of the supplements I added to my dog's diet with whole foods. Mm-hmm. Because it takes time to research it and see what other people are doing and understanding the value of something. And so people ask, well, don't you add a multivitamin? I'm like, no, I add raw egg. That's a completely whole food. It's like, imagine what that environment must be like to grow a chick and, all the nutrients that need to be in there to grow a chick. And so that is an amazing multivitamin right there. Crack it open and put it in the bowl. Boom. And so there's your multivitamin. And most recently, I just replaced a pancreas supplement with fermented vegetables. And I'm like, this is like my newest win. So I'm telling everyone, go get fermented vegetables. Because, my dog, who, even though he's raw fed, he still has digestive issues because all of those rounds of antibiotics completely destroyed his gut. Mm-hmm. But fermented vegetables are making him a completely new dog. And they saved me $45 a month. And it's just like, it's amazing what you can do with a fresh food diet. And most of these things you can make yourself at home if you have the time. If you don't have the time, you can either, I say, trade with someone who can do it or go and get it at, we have all these natural grocery stores, or many of us do, and go and talk to them about getting this stuff in. It's just amazing.
See, that's what I've always been very sad to have given up by leaving Los Angeles for the Midwest is where I'm at, we don't have any of that. So it is a little bit difficult. And I talk to people in the Midwest now. Okay, of course, let's take away, Austin, Dallas, parts of trendy Texas. Let's take away our big cities. They have it. But for the most part, it is flyover. And there's not a lot of those good stores like your Whole Foods, which, trust me, on a daily basis, I miss my Whole Foods and my Trader Joe's. Those are two stores I cannot say I don't miss on a daily. But, we have to do, pretty much what we can do. But there's still so many options. I mean, yes, you could go to the market and you could buy everything right there. Just make sure you buy quality meat. Don't buy, the garbagey meat, because then you're almost, in a sense, you are doing better. You're doing better than the Kibble. Let me start with that. But you're still you can make even more improvements, and that's what I like about what you're doing is you have it right there, and then you're so active in your blog. I ever since we started talking, I was online each day reading your stuff. And I'm going, man, she puts content out. It's hard enough to do one episode a week, and yet you're posting multiple times a day. I'm like, where do you find the time or even the content? That is amazing.
I have my friend Don. It's like I met Don years ago when I used to have a photography blog, and he became a really good friend of mine over the years. And he says that I have 5 extra hours that other people just don't have in, the average day. And it's like, maybe I do. I take advantage of having a smartphone, and, I just quickly do stuff, and I schedule things over the weekend. And I think it's easy for me because, unlike a lot of, websites that write about dog nutrition, I'm only writing about my 4 dogs. So content is easy to come by. And I don't have to make them super long, complicated, scientific blog posts. I just share what I'm learning. So it's like this, I took today off so that I can get some writing done, and I'll write about fermented vegetables and then, of course, where you can buy them or how you can make them. And it's so, I don't think people realize just how easy it is to do, because my blog is kind of like just having a diary where I'm just documenting, okay, this is what I figured out this week, and this is how it worked, and this is what I'm going to do. And it's something that I'm so passionate about, and I love it so much. And whenever I get an email from one of my readers who says that they switched to raw because of my blog, or you talked to me on the phone one time a couple of years ago and I switched, and that makes me feel so good. And the success stories that I get back from people, and it's, it just makes me want to do it more and more, because when I started feeding raw, the information was out there. I just didn't know what to look for. And so it all quickly became overwhelming. And I wanted to be a voice that was like, hey, let's just be friends, and we're going to go to Starbucks and sit down and talk about this. And that's what I wanted my blog to have, that feel of, this is just information. It's easy to digest. It's easy to remember. I'm not going to hit you with a bunch of historical, scientific facts on why this is the way it is, because to be honest, if it works, I don't really care why. Or, maybe I want to know a little bit, but I really don't need to go deep down into the annals of science and history to figure out why my dog needs to be fed this way. And thankfully, there are plenty of websites that will give you that. I get to just be the easy person that says, hey, I add golden paste to my dog's food and it works. Here's a video. And people are like, okay, then I'll do it too. And I feel like fortunate that I can do that I can be the person that tests it out, that, okay, I've been doing this for a few weeks now, and this is what I discovered. This is what's working. This is what isn't working. And still encourage people to do their own homework. Go easy, go slow. Don't feel like you have to change everything today or tomorrow, but, at least here's some information for you, so that there is someone that this worked for.
And see, that's all that matters. When you're saying you're not going to go into the scientific side, and it is the veterinarian jargon that you're trying to avoid, because again, none of us are veterinarians, And two, we're just average people trying to do right by our dogs and our cats, and we don't need to know it by the scientific word. We just need to know how to do it and why it works.
Yeah,
so you're right there on it. And it's not the Big Bang Theory for animal, care. It's just, and it's funny because you said, you wanted to have a blog that was just sitting down at Starbucks. That's what this is. I always said this is like having a cup of coffee around people who are talking about something, and as you're listening, you can sit in your car, or sit at your cubicle, wherever you're at, and even comment out loud while listening to it, and then once on social media, comment on it, talk to me. I mean, I love that. I don't want this to be, when the mic goes off, I don't want it to just end, and I'm sure the same thing goes for you. I mean, you have a lot more availability on content because they go right to your blog. With me, I post on all these pages and say, hey, talk to me. What do you have questions about? Because that's what this is all about. The conversation starts when the microphone turns off, not the conversation ends. And, hey, Kimberly's right, everybody. Whatever she says, that's what it is. Then we don't want to hear anything from you. No, see, that's the part that I want to avoid.
Exactly. That I see people do that, and I think they do themselves such a disservice.
Yes.
It makes me cringe when someone cites me as an expert in a concept, especially when I have no idea. It's just sort of like, I had someone do that the other day, and they're like, well, Kimberly said, and when Kimberly says blank, then I'm going to do, and I'm just like, okay, so I was just guessing when I said that. It made sense to me at the time, but since then I learned something more. So this is and it's just like one of those where I would love a world in which I knew everything. That would be boring, but it would be convenient because it's a lot of work to raise 4 dogs on a raw diet and trying to figure out things and stuff like that, in your spare time and then write about it. Mm-hmm. But, I'm open to new information, and thank goodness I am, because if I weren't open to new information, I doubt that I'd still be feeding raw, because I would have given up a long time ago because it would have been too expensive, or it would have been too inconvenient, or, there's so many things that I was doing 4 years ago that I laugh at. Like when I see people posting about what they're doing and they're so frustrated, and I laugh because I remember being there and trying to convince someone that, oh my gosh, it's so easy. It doesn't have to be that complicated. I get why you're making it complicated, because we're in an environment in which people are telling us that dog nutrition is complicated, and that's why we need to feed Kibble. And it's just sort of like, no, it's the opposite. It's so easy. Kibble is complicated.
It is.
Feeding is easy. It's so easy what we're doing, because, and when you stop overanalyzing yourself and instead of because my thing was, it felt so overwhelming hearing all these different opinions. Instead, what I would do is just listen. And things that resonated with me, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to give that a try. Things that didn't resonate with me, I'm going to file that away and bring it out later on. There are people who were talking to me about fermented vegetables months ago, but all of a sudden Billy said it, in a way that made so much sense to me that it made me stop and go and buy fermented vegetables. And now I'm revisiting all the other people who were talking about it and learning from them as well. So it's like we're not going to all know everything all at the same time. It's okay to find out 6 months from now that you were doing something wrong, because regardless, what we're feeding our dogs is still so much healthier than feeding a commercial dry food diet. That, take your time and figure it out. And I find it fun. I find it, fun and exciting to see. I got home last night, and my dog, Rodrigo, he was so excited to see me that he just started running in loops around me, something that he rarely does. He hasn't done it really in a long time. And I was just sitting there watching him and thinking to the fact that, 4.5 years ago, a veterinarian told me that he would live a short life, that he might have to have one of his legs amputated, and how sad it was, because, these rescues just don't live as long, because you just never know where they're coming from. And at the time I was just like, oh my God, it's such a horrible thing to say to me.
Right.
And today it's like, I want to march him back down to that vet's office and go, look at him now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's not on a joint supplement, even though he said he was going to need to be on one for the rest of his life. No, he gets everything he needs from his diet. He doesn't have digestive issues anymore. He doesn't have allergies anymore. He doesn't have ear infections. He doesn't have rashes. He doesn't have any of the issues. The only time he goes to the vet is to have blood work done. And I do that once a year, and he comes back with flying colors. I mean, he's like a winner. I mean, he's like the poster child for why raw feeding is good and is species appropriate. And, you know, that's exciting to me. So if, you know, having a healthy dog, and a dog that I didn't think I would have for 7 years, and he's 7 years old now, and, you know, my other dog, Sydney, you know, she has some joint issues, and knowing that I can help her through diet, and, you know, I adjust her diet here and there, and knowing what works and that I can do these things, I'm perfectly fine with people contradicting me and telling me that I'm wrong about something. Because if that means I get to learn something that's going to be able to be applied to my dog's diet and have them be with me even longer, then fine. You know, shoot me down all you can if that means that my dogs get to live forever. I'm more than happy to be wrong.
And that's where you pretty much have layered it right out there of why raw diet works, or why I should serve raw diet, and the benefits to serving raw. Those were the two. There were two things I was going to ask along our conversation, and you know, I never tell anybody really what we're going to talk about. It's just bullet points of what I want to ask. And you know, I could have, again, it could be Darwin's, it could be Primal, it could be Radcat, it could be any one of those companies telling the same story. And people are going to say, well, you know, they're trying to sell a product. And yes, they are. But they're also giving fact. And you firsthand, you deal with these guys just as much as I do, probably more. And yet, here you are. You are a regular, everyday pet parent. You are a consumer. And you are telling the same stories, the same results, the same, and I'll use air quotes on scientific benefits to why raw diet is working. So it's like, okay, you know, people can shoot down an episode or even you know, one of your blogs where it would be like, well, you know, of course, and I don't know if this has happened. I'm pretty sure it's the internet, so it always happens. But you post something and they'll say, well, of course they're going to say that they're selling the product. Yeah, you're right. They are. Here, I will, you know, again, I'll source you somebody from the regular world where we all are at. And they can tell you the same thing. And I can bring another person, you know. That's what I find funny about all of this. And you have to face this, probably as much as I do, where it's people, and I don't know if they're even bots. I almost wonder if they work for, you know, the actual big pet food companies where they do say these things. You're just like, really? Do you believe this? Because it's crazy.
Well, it's funny because, you know, I speak with these, you know, I speak with a lot of different people, and like, you know, people who very much support feeding a kibble diet and a commercial kibble diet. And I butt heads with people in the blogging world often because, you know, I don't, and it's not, and a lot of people think that because I feed raw, then I'm super anti-kibble. I'm anti-kibble for my 4 dogs. I do not want to be put in a position where I have to feed my dogs kibble. And the reason why is because I saw firsthand what kibble can do to your dog with Rodrigo. So I don't want to ever do that again to a dog. So raw is what I feed, and I see that it works. However, I don't resent or, you know, judge anyone who feeds kibble because I don't know where they're coming from.
Right.
If they're interested in why I feed raw, I'm more than happy to share. But it's just, I think that's what I find interesting is, you know, when you were talking about, you know, like the bots and, you know, the people who are, you know, are critical of what we're doing. And you wonder why. And I honestly, I always tell myself this is that it comes down to, no one likes to be judged. Even if you're not actively judging them, no one likes to be judged for what they're doing. And I think deep down, everyone understands that kibble isn't ideal. Kibble isn't the best food. And when you mention, you know, someone called a kibble food that adds freeze-dried bits to their food. Someone called it, in an article, a raw food diet. And I corrected that. Like, no, this is not a raw food diet. This is a kibble diet. And the person got really defensive in response. And I didn't get upset because I knew that was going to come, because people don't like to feel judged. And so they lash out back instead of, just walking away or saying, hey, tell me more. Some people lash out. And, my critique is people are like, you're not a vet. You're not a nutritionist. How dare you tell people how to feed their dogs? And I'm like, yeah, I'm very clear about the fact that I'm not a vet and that I'm not a nutritionist. And what I tell people is how I feed my dogs. So it's like, I'm very clear on that. But, I understand why people get defensive. And, but I'm still going to put that information out there, because I think for every person who gets angry with me, who calls me a name, who leaves a nasty snide comment on, social media or my blog, there are 10 people who want to know because, their dog is sick, or their dog isn't doing well, or they want to do better for their dog. And those are the people that I'm doing this for. I'm doing this for the person I was, 4.5 years ago, when I was so frustrated about, my dog constantly needing to go to the vet, and he was still pretty much a puppy.
I think people are just, I think you're right. I think that in my experiences, they don't want to know that they're wrong. And I think that's what it really is. I don't think that anybody really feels like anybody who's actually trying to put the message out there. I don't think that they think that we're telling them, hey, you're wrong and you're doing wrong, because in your blog, on this podcast, in a lot of different platforms, whether it's Jay and Adrian for the Two Crazy Cat Ladies, it's Cole, it's any one of the people that are trying to put a positive message out there. I'm not seeing anybody say, hey, if you're doing this, you're wrong. What it is I think it's here's the facts, and they think, okay, well, like you said, this kibble base, and they think it's raw. I think they're more or less, they believe that they're right, and they just don't want to actually transition of, maybe I'm wrong. And that's another hard one. That's actually more of the difficult change of personality than anything else, because everybody does say, well, I'm doing the right thing. I buy expensive food, and this is, again, back to that soapbox, where I've had that conversation. Well, this is $30 cat food from the beep cat food company, and it's like, and I've taken down the $8 bag and said everything in this bag that's $8 is the same in the $20-some for the same bag. It's still that product. But my cat doesn't throw up. Yes, but your cat's a carnivore. This is garbage. And then it's like, well, my cat pees all over the place, and I don't know why. It's dehydrated. But it doesn't throw up anymore. And, it's one of those moments where, look, I understand you think you're doing right, and you just, maybe it's just the times nobody can be wrong. I don't know. But there is a right way, and there is a great way, and there's a wrong way. We're all going to go into those platforms, and information is key. If you don't want to take that information, well, you're destined to have a problem. And then what's going to happen is it's a vicious cycle. Their dog or cat is going to be seriously, well, let's see, cancer or any kind of disease, or even the worst of death. And then they're going to realize, oh, crap, now I see it. But it has to go all that way. I mean, I see it even in my situation where a dog will pass. And it's the hardest thing. Being in grooming, we fall in love with our dogs that come in to see us. We play with our dogs. We have fun with our dogs that we get to see. It's a daycare center, in a sense. And then we hear that they pass away, and it's the worst thing you ever hear. And they'll say, oh, yeah, they had, cancer, or they had this or that. And it always goes back to, what were you feeding your dog? And they'll tell. And again, where I'm going to go, it's beep. Yeah. And then, they go, but I got a new puppy. Oh, great. Okay, great. That's great. What are you feeding your dog? Oh, the same as I fed my other dog. And you just faint because you want to say, no, that's what caused it this time. Or, well, my dog is 10 years old. I got 10 good years out of him. Oh, my God. It's not, it's like, come on, guys, this is easy. But, again, you had said earlier you wish you had all the knowledge. It wouldn't be boring because you would be pulling your hair out like I know you do. I do it all the time. Where you're like, I know the answer. I have the answer. And yet, what's going to happen? You're going to be sitting there all the time. In some days, I wish that I didn't know what I know because then I could be ignorant and be like, do. But the unfortunate is, we want to be good pet parents and we want to help others. And you see it and I'm seeing it now where a lot of people are reaching out going, hey, what do I do? Which, that's one thing, because I wanted to ask you on, and I know you never marry any real pet food company or raw food provider, but I'm going to ask 2 questions on that. And that is, first, who do you trust for your raw diet? And the second question is the best meats to use, or best proteins, because meats could, protein to use for your actual everyday servings.
Well, there's so many brands out there that I love, but I think 2 or 3 brands that I trust implicitly. Darwin's Pet, because they're the ones that got me started. I credit them for saving Rodrigo's life because, before I found them, I was, trying to figure out how to feed raw myself. It was overwhelming. It was complicated. I had too many people giving me advice and suggestions, and they made it so easy, and it worked. So it's definitely, Darwin's. And then, there are these, I guess, little brands that, people just don't really know about. But one is, Answers Pet Food, because all of their food is fermented. And, the whole process of, like I buy their fermented fish stock and their kefir, and the idea of adding, that this adds to my food or add it to my dog's food. And with one dog, it completely heals his gut. With another dog, it completely heals her joint issues. I mean, it's like these foods, which are fresh, natural, are going to where the dog needs it most in their system and making them stronger and healthier. And it's just, I love that. And then third is Vital Essentials Raw, which is actually the first company that I did a raw food review for. And I don't feed my dogs their food. I feed my cat their food because after years of feeding my dogs raw, I finally was able to get my cat off of Kibble. It took 4 months. And he will only eat one brand of food. It comes in a pouch. And then I add freeze-dried raw to it from Vital Essentials. And he loves it. And he's doing so well because of it. And he's a senior cat. You would not know he was a senior cat. A lot of people think that he's a juvenile when they meet him. And so those are the 3 brands that I just trust. I know the people behind the brands. They're good people. They want the best. They do the best. They take the time and talk to people and educate them on raw feeding, on the food. And they seem to not be so focused on, me, we're the best, buy us. They're more focused on, what's the problem? How can we help you? What does your dog or cat need? And they're constantly innovating. They're constantly coming out with new things to help people. And that's what I think is so amazing and important because, when it comes to raw feeding, it's easy to just say, here's the food, but to constantly, keep up with the idea that, now they're starting to do life stages of raw, with the recognition that senior dogs need different nutrients than a puppy does. And those type of things, which will make the average, pet parent a little more comfortable feeding raw because it's kind of scary to understand that stuff for yourself and feed each dog accordingly. I mean, because for me, in my house, I mean, all of my dogs are kind of close to the same age. We have 4, 2 are 7 years old and 2 are 3.5 years old. And, but they eat all the same thing. The only thing that changes is, you know, my adult dogs get a little bit more golden paste than the younger dogs, that type of thing. But it would be a challenge to have to feed all the dogs, to be a short order cook. And that's where, you know, the pre-made raw brands, some of them are doing us a service by making it so much easier for us. So those are the ones that I like. And then you said, like, which proteins are the best? I say whatever protein your dog will eat and thrive on, because I try to feed my dogs. I try to give them exposure to everything. So they've eaten mackerel, sardines, salmon, kangaroo, you know, venison, elk, emu, alpaca, you know, pork, turkey, chicken, guinea hen, quail, pheasant, you know, just beef and tripe and lamb, and I mean, you name it, my dogs have ate it. And so I mostly try to look for, I keep my budget so that everything costs less than $3 a pound. Most everything costs less than $2 a pound, but I have a limit of, I need it to be less than $3 a pound. I'm feeding 4 dogs.
I could never eat kangaroo. But I could feed my dog it, but I would never be able to do it. They're just so cute.
I know. Same thing with alpaca. I will feed it to my dogs, but I will not eat that.
No.
I will not do that. But yeah, it's just like I figure that, you know, some dogs that even though they're switched to raw, like with dogs with protein intolerances, they'll switch in the raw, and all of a sudden those intolerances are gone. Like the dog, oh, they can eat chicken now, they're fine. Mm-hmm. I wasn't so lucky. So I had all my dogs tested a few years ago, and all of them test that they can't eat chicken. And I have a thing where if one of my dogs, or I say 2 of my dogs can't eat something, then none of my dogs will eat it, because it's just too hard to make different meals. So I don't buy chicken because 2 of my dogs can't have chicken, and they can't have guinea hen because it's too similar to chicken. They can't have turkey because it's too similar to chicken, but they do well on duck and quail. So those are the type of things that I get. And so I try to find protein that's within my budget and that allows me to feed them a variety, because I think rotating proteins when you can is so very beneficial and important, because each protein brings a whole new set of nutrients. And it works their gut differently. You know, venison is heavier than duck is. Duck is fatter than venison is. And so they're doing different things in their system. So I say do the best you can with what you have.
You know, another thing that has come up, and I know you probably have covered it, so I'm sorry, but it was definitely something that came up even today, where people are like, well, I'm squeamish. I can't have blood in there. I can't do just put raw food in a plate. I can't do that. What's the alternative? And I'm like, well, there's tons of alternatives. But you know what? I do think you're an expert, so I'm going to leave that one to you. And excuse me. And I told you, there's been a couple people who have already said, when I told them I was talking to you, they called you the expert. So I'm gonna stay with that.
But yeah, I hear that from people, especially people who are vegetarian or vegan, who just cannot see themselves handling raw meat. And that's where, you know, pre-made raw comes in, or, you know, freeze-dried raw, or dehydrated dog food. That's where that comes in. So if you're not prepared to handle raw meat, then, you know, there are options for you. The sad part is that the more you have other people do things for you, the more money you're going to spend.
Yes.
So if you have to buy commercial raw, you're going to pay for it, because they're taking care of the balancing. They're taking care of the sourcing. You know, they're putting it in a nice package for you and either delivering it to your door or your local grocery store. But it's going to be expensive. But the bonus part is that because raw is becoming so mainstream, it's, you know, people have been calling it a trend for several years now, and they're seeing that it's not going away. And thanks to Cole Harrington and Petfold and the work that, you know, Dr. Karen Becker and Roddy Habib and Barbara Royal and the people at Keto Pet and, you know, and on and on and on, just all these people who are constantly speaking out about fresh food, it's becoming mainstream.
Yes.
So you can now order it online, and you can go to the sites like Amazon or Chewy.com and order freeze-dried raw and get it at a discount delivered to your door for free shipping and things like that. But it's still just going to be more expensive than if you were to do it yourself. But it is an option. And I think that, you know, I always tell people, you know, just because you're a vegan or vegetarian doesn't mean that handling raw is bad. And, you know, maybe you're squeamish, but, you know, keep in mind that, you know, Betty, who started, you know, she's co-founder of Bravo Pet Foods, she's a vegetarian. And a lot of the people who are in, you know, heads of a lot of these raw food companies are vegetarians. Mm-hmm. And, you know, these holistic veterinarians who are proponents of raw feeding, they're vegetarians. And so it's amazing because it's not so much about, you know, oh my God, this is gross. It switches over to, oh my gosh, this is appropriate. So while people believe that meat may not be species appropriate for humans because we're, you know, omnivores, it very much is for dogs. And so it just makes sense, you know, to feed a dog. And so that's just how they get over the squeamishness of handling the blood. And I think even Jay said she loves, you know, making food and stuff, but she just won't eat it. But she'll cook it, but she won't eat it. And so it's just like, you know, people do eventually, I think, get past it. But it's just, you know, in the beginning, until you get to a point where you're comfortable, there are options. And I think as we go forward, we'll see more and more options, you know, because even, you know, a lot of the kibble companies, even though I don't agree that, you know, freeze-dried raw mixed into kibble is a healthy diet for dogs, it's still a step in the right direction. And they're trying.
I look at it, and again, it's okay, how are we going to get that transition? I'm okay with transition because it's at least making progress. So I'm not exactly against it. I'm just like, maybe it's just a start. It's a jumping off point. Let's go with that. At least people are saying, well, I'm at least doing it. That's the first step. Instead of, well, I'm doing the best I can. Those are the ones that they really aren't. I mean, as blunt as I'm going to say it, they're really not. They say they are, but they really don't give a damn. And again, I'm blunt. I say it. I get in trouble for it, but you know, it's an interesting thing. And you know, you mentioned veterinarians, and I'm just bound to ask the whole, you know, question with it, and that is the trust that we now have as pet parents with veterinarians. And I'm not speaking of, and I'll say it again, where I'm actually now live talking, but I'm not speaking of any veterinarian in particular. I'm just saying there's a real trust issue right now, and you have said a couple different things, especially with your own vet talking about your own dog. I've had experiences where people are like, "Oh, that dog, it won't last for more than a year at most. You might as well put it down." And I think to myself, that's probably not the option. There's a lot of different situations that I've seen or been privy to hear, and I'm saying, wait a second, there's alternative. Why is it that there's only this A or B put down, or they're going to have to live their life under all these expensive medicines? So are we really in an age where do we trust? How do we trust a veterinarian?
And it's funny because I get this question all the time. I see it all the time. I, too, struggled with my mistrust of the veterinarian community. And I sort of it changed for me when I spoke with Dr. Courtney, who he is a Hollywood, I shouldn't say Hollywood veterinarian, but he's on Animal Planet, I think. And, you know, he has a, you know, really huge following. He's, you know, goes on television programs as an expert. And he's gorgeous, too. He's total, like, he is. He's gorgeous. And I got an opportunity to interview him in 2016. And he is the nicest guy in the planet. And what I loved about him, and the reason why he changed, in fact, that's what I wrote a whole blog post about it because he was so inquisitive. I was supposed to be interviewing him, but when he found out that I fed raw, he flipped the interview around and started asking me questions. And aren't you worried about this? And how do you handle this? And by the time we finished our discussion, I don't think he was ever anti-raw, and nor do I think he's now a proponent of raw, but he had a better understanding of why people fed raw, and that we're not all just running to the grocery store, buying a pack of ground beef and throwing it into a dish. We're actually taking a lot of time in formulating our dog's diet and understanding what our dog needs and adjusting a diet to meet new needs as they get older. And that's something that he wasn't aware of, that, there is a community that supports each other that is very educated, and we're self-educated, with the support of, veterinarians and nutritionists in our community. We're doing this on our own and it's working. And that was just really fascinating to him. And when I had that experience, I started hitting, I shouldn't say hitting, but, whenever I end up with a conflict with a veterinarian at a, public venue, I take it head on. I overheard a veterinarian, I won't say the name because I don't like them, but they're a chain of veterinarian hospitals, so I'm sure people understand who I'm talking about, owned by a huge pet food conglomerate.
Ah, yes.
Well,
attached to a big pet food store.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So those people, I don't know if you know who I'm talking about.
Oh, I do.
My girlfriend and we had a booth at the Seattle Pet Expo, and they were in the booth behind us. And so I'm coming back, and she goes, yeah, they're over there talking crap about raw feeders, and they're saying that we're disgusting, we're unsanitary, we're stupid, our diet isn't balanced, we're killing our dogs, we're making our dogs sick, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, okay. And so I walk around the corner, and I go, hey, my name is Kimberly. I wanted to introduce myself because I have the booth right over here. I'm one of those dirty, stupid, moronic raw feeders you guys are talking about. And they just basically froze. And 3 of them walked away, but one of them decided to take me on. And we had a conversation. And even though he started out as pretty, I wouldn't say aggressive, but just sort of like, let me put you in your place to tell you how wrong you're doing. But by the time we finished our conversation, he was just sort of like, I wouldn't be worried about you feeding your dog raw if my dogs were his patients. Because he saw that I was putting so much time and, and understanding. Because he was like, well, do you add corn to your dog's food? And I'm like, absolutely not. Dogs have no need for corn. In fact, I question whether or not humans should be eating corn. It's an unnecessary carb. And he's like, well, I mean cornmeal. And I'm like, my answer hasn't changed. He's like, well, it's a superior source of protein. And I'm like, more superior than protein? It's just sort of like, but, we were talking it out. But by the time we finished, he had a better understanding. And so I figured instead of arguing with veterinarians, some of which drive me nuts with the information that they're putting out there, that it's so one-sided, so, biased, and they never want to actually talk to us. It's like, at least call one raw feeder, not the raw feeder who was only feeding ground beef and so their dog got sick and died. Actually talk to a real raw feeder who's responsible and add that story to make a more balanced narrative of what's going on. But if you're just going to do like a secret, advertorial for Kibble, then, I just don't have any room for that. But
right.
When I have an opportunity to talk to a veterinarian who is actually open to hearing what I'm doing and why I do it and how it's working for my dog, I love that. It feels amazing because I hope that for the next person who comes along and wants to feed their dog a raw diet or is feeding their raw diet, and they meet this veterinarian, they won't feel judged, or they'll get a little more support. And so I haven't turned any veterinarians into raw feeders, but I have turned a lot of them around as they've seen my dogs, seen how healthy they are. And the only thing that's different is that my dogs are raw fed. And it's just like, like for instance, when Scout and Zoe, when they had their spay and neuter surgeries, they healed in half the time that they were expected to heal. And when we brought them in for a checkup, everyone came out to look at them because they were like, I cannot believe that this has happened. And the veterinarian was like, it's got to be the raw diet. They're just so healthy. And, again, he's still not promoting raw to his patients, but, he was like, now I see. I see it right here in these dogs. And so I think over time, as more of us have these stories, we have these healthy dogs, veterinarians are seeing the benefit. They're seeing dogs, tumors shrink because people are adding golden paste to the dog's diet, and they're seeing all these wonderful beneficial things happening. We're going to see the veterinarian community slowly come over. They may not be like, screw Kibble, but I think that they'll be more opening to telling patients, well, since this isn't working, why don't you try raw feeding? And gaining that education, because I'm hearing stories about veterinarians who finally, maybe their dog got sick, or one of their patients, they just couldn't figure it out, so they finally just succumbed and called someone and said, tell me more about this raw feeding, and they saw this patient turn around, and now they're a proponent of it. And so I think Kibble has been around since I think World War II.
Yeah,
that's a lot of history. Yeah, that's a lot of history to overcome in just a few years, especially when that history is subsidizing the veterinarian schools. So,
you know what? You answered my soapbox question just now. Just pointing that out. I was listening to this going, she does soapbox. I see what you did there.
It's easy to get on my soapbox with veterinarians because, they're some of them are so strongly, attached to Kibble and that raw feeding is bad. And it's so interesting to me because, when you ask them, well, why is it bad? And they start telling you, the story, the bacteria, the bones, and they start telling you it's not balanced, all these different things. And you can counter that with not just one, but several points that shoot that down in the water. Then they're just sort of like, what are they left with? So now, why is raw feeding bad? I've just explained away all of this. Why is it bad? And they don't have anything. And it's like either they can continue, promoting Kibble or, that type of thing. But I sort of feel like when you intelligently and respectfully basically tell them the truth of what raw feeding is, you take away a lot of that, the air in their sails. Mm-hmm. And they kind of, maybe they won't recommend it, but I don't think that they'll be so anti-raw.
I'm part of it. I agree on it completely. I think part of it comes down to the textbooks when they're actually in school and who actually is putting them together. Mm-hmm. I think that has a great deal because it's influenced by that whole concept. I think that it's still, and it's so hard for me to say this because we have decades of experience with it, but raw is actually still very new, and yet it's hard for me to say that, but again, a few decades of actually learning it and doing it, but almost in a secret basement underneath the big pet food companies. So it's been quiet. I mean, I didn't know anything about it growing up as a kid. And now it's like, as an adult, I'm like, oh yeah, I know about it now, but I don't think I would know as much if it wasn't for the research, which is still not out there. Yeah. So you got two real big strikes on it, and a lot of veterinarians are definitely not young. So you've got the old school mentality that's like, no, this is what it's been forever, and it will never change because this is what it was. And the other thing, and I got this from Primal, and that is, look at the actual vendors that go into any kind of veterinarian. They are the big players. You don't see Rawls going into any. You don't see Darwin's going in. You don't see Primal going in. You don't see Ratcat going in. You just see the beep, 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 beep going in. Well,
right.
How do we, as pet parents, know? I mean, there was a documentary years back about eating McDonald's.
Yeah,
and all of a sudden, yes, and it's like that little documentary became this big. Oh wow, I shouldn't eat that every day for lunch then.
Yeah,
but before, yes, And before that, people were like, well, going to lunch, where are you going? I think I'm going to go get a burger.
And all of a sudden, yes, even though McDonald's says it wasn't because of the movie, but they got rid of their supersizing and they introduced salads. You know, I mean, their salads aren't much healthier than their burgers, but still, it's like, you know, they made a change. And it's interesting because I think, you know, we're seeing the same thing with the movie Pet Food. Yes. Since Pet Food was released in January, my traffic has gone up 50%. And it is because people want to know. People are asking the questions. People are contacting me and saying, hey, what can I do? I'm nervous. I want to do this. And it's so funny because everyone is excited and ready to jump into it, which I'm excited for. But I also get a kick out of just telling people, slow down.
Yeah.
Just add some fresh food and start studying, because you're going to have to figure this out on your own. You can ask questions in the community. You will get overwhelmed. You can feed pre-made raw. It will get expensive, but you can do this. But just don't stress yourself out, because that's what I find that most people are doing. I had someone in my group last month that was like, I have to go back to Kibble because this is just too hard. It's too complicated. And it's because they allow themselves to get overwhelmed, because we don't have an organized system like going to the pet store and buying a bag of dog food that we've seen, you know, a gazillion commercials about.
Right.
I mean, they drive me crazy, especially the one with the dog running with the wolves. Like, really?
Yeah,
really?
The wolves would eat that dog. Okay, let's start there.
Let's start there. It's like, and the wolves aren't running to a bowl of kibble.
No.
And then the same company, one of their executives turned around and wrote an article bashing raw feeders for trying to feed our dogs like they're wolves. And it's just sort of like, okay, first of all, none of us think our dogs are wolves. We're not stupid. We are just trying to replicate a diet in today, a diet that our dogs are biologically created to eat, but with what's the word? I can't even think of the word, but basically with the constraints of what we have today, because, wolves aren't going to the grocery store and buying their meat. So we're not doing fresh kills in the morning for our dogs to eat. But, we're doing the best that we can with the information that we have and the resources that are available to us.
If that dog was running with those wolves, it would be a perfect example for raw diet. That's exactly what this is. That's what I didn't understand with that whole commercial. I kind of laugh at it and go, hey, it's a raw diet actual commercial. They're advocating for it. Wait, what? They're actually catering to a kibble. What is the kibble?
It's like, please, let's go to Wolf Haven or some other type of place where they're raising wolves and ask them what they're feeding those wolves. Because they're not feeding them kibble. It's just like, come on. It's like, please. And the thing about it is that I get it. I get why we're seeing brands co-opting species appropriate and biologically appropriate. I get why we're seeing brands add in freeze-dried raw bits to their kibble, and they're trying to take advantage of this movement to feed dogs healthier. And I commend them for trying, but it's sort of like, that's not raw. And that's, I think, while other people, everyone has their like little, sensitive spots. My sensitive spot is whenever a kibble company co-opts a term or even tries to hint that they're a raw food diet, because I'm right there typing out the response. No, you are not a raw food diet. And I've managed over the years to be taken off of all of their mailing lists, so they no longer email me to ask me, well, how about this food? Is this food good enough for you to write about? And it's like, yes, I'm going to write about it. Just watch.
Oh, at least they talk to you. They will avoid me like the plague.
Well, they do now. Now they do. They leave me alone. I've burned a few of them a few times simply because, no, this is not. It's like, I commend you for making a good food or trying to make a better product. There's a lot of them where it's like, I don't think that these are terrible ingredients for a kibble product. For a kibble food, these are good ingredients. However, it's not raw. No. And I have a problem with brands saying, hey, we're bringing on the raw revolution. No, you're not. You're really not. You're not part of this revolution. Get out. We didn't invite you to the party. Go home. You're drunk.
This soapbox is getting bigger and bigger. I mean, it's now a stage. You know what? I love asking this question. It's not to goat you into anything. It's never to goat anybody. I love whenever I hear, I really don't have one. By the end of our conversation, I'm like, you have a stage.
I know. It just drives me crazy.
I love it.
I go into pet stores because it just drives me crazy. I'll look at them and I'm just like, no.
Well,
this is wrong.
On a side note, I had Pet Food Institute were supposed to be on. PFI had agreed to come on. They had their media department. It's a separate company. 2 hours before we were record, they miraculously disappeared. No word. We had an emergency, but on the paper, on the digital emails, it's canceled. And I sent her a message back. It's not a reschedule. It's a cancellation. Let me guess. Because I support raw food, because I actually support pet food, because the cast and director have been on the podcast. So you guys are actually afraid of actually having real questions asked. That's the whole reason. And, of course, they've never said a word since.
Yeah, I spoke to them at Super Zoo, and one thing that because I was surprised that they sent me an email inviting me to speak with them, which I was surprised about. I knew I got it because I was on the press list. Cole got the same email, and I was just like, I emailed Cole, and I'm like, hey, should I see if they'll let me talk to him? And he's like, yeah, do it. And so
I
tried to do this. I tried to interview them before, and they wouldn't respond to my questions. But it was because I was asking things like, how can you not think that, tainted chicken jerky represents something bad in the pet food industry? Like, someone didn't dot their I's and cross the T's as chicken jerky is killing dogs. And, but I had a list of questions like that, and they just vanished. Didn't hear a peep from them. Followed up, hey, I didn't get those answers. Nothing.
Nope.
So I was like, well, I'm going to see if they'll meet with me. And they did, and I kept waiting for them to cancel. They never did, and I sat down with them. So I left all those questions off the table because I figured, why bother? I have them here. I know what my answer is. But one thing that I was interested in talking to them about is why, besides, the huge lawsuit between two huge kibble brands, we don't really see kibble brands going after each other.
Nope.
They seem to circle the wagons and support each other. One of them will try something new and see if it works, and then all of them will roll it out. They're buying each other. They're buying the smaller brands and rolling them up into bigger brands. And, but we don't see this bickering back and forth. Whereas in the raw community, we can't stop attacking each other. I mean, it's insane how angry we are with people we don't even know. I mean, I had someone, every now and then people will send me screenshots of conversations that are being had either about me or about my blog or about my raw feeding group. And it used to upset me because it's like, why are these people so mean? But now it just makes me laugh because it's just sort of like, this is what I'm talking about. Why are we attacking each other? I mean, if we're all here to help raise awareness of raw feeding and that this is a better diet for dogs, it's saving dogs' lives, it's saving cats' lives, why can't we just stay focused on that? How is it that the kibble brands seem to get their act together, but we can't? And it basically came down to something that you've mentioned a few times, is that although people have been feeding raw for hundreds of years, I mean, kibble's only been around for 60, 70 years. We've been feeding, that's horrible math. So anyone who knows about World War II and I know
I wasn't going to say anything.
Yeah, please don't say anything to me. I just let's just go with it. But anyway, we're still new community.
Yeah.
So we, whereas the kibble brands, one thing that the person said was that with kibble, they look at competition as an opportunity to innovate. Whereas we're looking at competition as, I did that first. How dare you come along and do the same thing? And now I don't like you. And, and now none of my friends are going to like you. And whereas we need to be more focused on supporting each other. And it's one of those things where I think that, one misconception that I think people have about the kibble brands is the reason why they're coming out with the raw bits and the raw revolution and the biologically appropriate is because they're so threatened by the raw feeding community. And it's just sort of like, I don't think they are. I think they look at us, or, you know, at the raw food brands as competition and an opportunity to innovate. But for the most part, they're just watching us attack each other. And if we don't pull it together as a community and start supporting each other and stay focused on keeping the conversation going, we are going to implode. I mean, I don't think raw feeding is ever going to go away, but I think it's unfortunate that we have so many small pockets of people who are working together to raise awareness rather than a huge community like PFI, you know, where we're all working together to raise awareness and make a difference. And I think that that's changing because I think a lot of us have just gotten tired of the drama and the bickering and, you know, and things like that. But it needs to change faster, in my opinion, because we are so behind the 8 ball on this. I mean, they have, you know, all these decades of, you know, experience and time ahead of us where we're just scrambling together to figure this stuff out right now. And, but I think in the next year or two, we're going to see some really amazing things coming out of the raw feeding community, you know, supported by brands, but mostly just grassroots efforts of raw feeders coming together and sharing information in a more organized fashion to, you know, keep that pet food momentum going until Pet Food 2 hits the theaters.
I don't know anything about that. And neither do you.
It's gonna happen. I have faith.
I don't know what you're talking about. But you know, with the inner bickering, they can't bicker because they all sit on the same board. I mean, here's an quote unquote institute that the people that are supposed to be regulated are the ones making the rules. How do you have any inner bickering when you're saying, oh, we're going to be able to add this much more? It's okay. Hey, we're all going to actually get $10 million bonuses for doing this. Okay. So, you know, I get it. And for anybody who's listening from PFI, which I know there's none, this is why you ran away from me like a coward. But whatever. I'd love for them to come on. I promise you guys, if you ever did, I wouldn't be easy on you, and that's why I know they won't. And I was actually going to be respectful, honestly. I wasn't going to destroy them. And it was only because it was a respect thing. I don't do that on this podcast. But when you do it 2 hours before, and even that morning, I get an email, oh, we're so looking forward to it. This is great. Thank you for reaching out. I mean, they were just giving me all this praise and just like, oh wow, you know, I'm going to be respectful. I'm not going to destroy them. And then with that, I'm like, oh yeah, if I ever get you guys in my web, I will. But you know, unfortunately, we're winding down because we only have so long. That's what I hate about a podcast. You only have so long, and then it's like you run out of room, and you're like, well, I'm going to have to edit it, and I don't want to edit. I hate taking things out. So, I want to, you know, definitely hit on a couple topics. Now, in the last, about 5, 6, 7 minutes, like that, you had said you have workshops. I wanted to know more about that, and I wanted to know, is there anything that you wanted to plug?
Oh, yes, of course. I live in Marysville, Washington, so thank you to the city of Marysville. They allow me to hold workshops, and so I'm holding 3 this fall, which I need to update my blog to put the dates in. And it's basically just a 3 or 4 hour workshop where I explain, you know, what raw feeding is, why I feed raw, how I feed raw, where I get, you know, all my ingredients from, and answer questions from people. And it's been really fantastic. I held 2 in the spring, and so I'm going to have 3 in the fall, and I'll be doing that twice annually, so every fall and every spring. And I am wrapping up this weekend final edits to my book, A Novice's Guide to Raw Feeding for Dogs.
Awesome.
And I am praying that it will be on the market on September 1st because I'm self-publishing. So it's been a learning experience, but it's pretty exciting too because I'm winding down to the end and I have to keep stopping myself from changing things. Like, oh, I need a chapter on fermenting vegetables now, and it's like, no, there's no time. I don't know enough about it to write about it. So it's been a lot of fun. So I am wrapping that up this weekend.
Wow. Well, everybody who has ever been in this little pocket of community, it's always been the same thing. You got to come back on the podcast. I got to talk more to you. That's the hard part of only having this small window. And people are probably going, we've been going for over an hour. It is small. That's just why, I said, you asked me how long do I do it, and I said an hour. And I could tell you were just like, wow, that's hard to do. It sounds absolutely hard to do. And I get that. Once you get started in this, it just goes by. And
yeah.
I had it started with Cole. It's like, we're going to do about an hour. He goes, oh, I don't know if we could do that. And that sure went for, well over an hour. Dr. Royal, I told her, well, it's about an hour. And she had the same response. Ooh, that's a lot. And it went to the bitter end. I literally had no more time left. It's funny because once we get into this, and we all have the same thing that really got us all talking, and that was pet food. We all got into that. We all kind of had some connection to Cole, and then we've all kind of met up with each other at some point, which I wanted to be at Super Zoo, but I opened up this shop, and I had no way of leaving for Vegas, and it killed me that week. I'm not going to lie. I was dying that entire week. So I'm envious that you got to go. I saw the photos.
Good week.
I was supposed to be at the wrap party for Pet Food. Thank you, Jane Adrian, for inviting me. I couldn't make it. I still feel the burn from that. Literally, I feel bad I missed that. But I keep saying next year I will hopefully make it. But I definitely want to have you back on. I want to go over more nutrition, more things that we dislike, and I want to hear more on your soapboxing, which has turned into a stage.
I know.
Thank you for being on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much, Kimberly, for being on the podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time to actually sit down and record this. I know at the time when we recorded, she was finishing her book, and we didn't have a lot of time to really discuss the book, so in the closing moments of the podcast, I really wanted to go over it a little bit with you guys. I get a lot of questions each week from new pet parents, or even new to raw feeding pet parents, about what do I do? And my best suggestion is, and this is going to be my current suggestion to everybody new to it, is, for one, go to keepthetailwagging.com. Her blog has so much information, and it's so positive and informative that I can't stress enough. For all beginning pet parents and new to raw feeding pet parents, this is the best place to start. The next is her book released. It's available now on Amazon.com. It's called A Novice's Guide to Raw Feeding for Dogs. You can check that out. You can look at the link on our Facebook page, the Groomer Next Door Podcast. You can go to keepthetailwagging.com or go straight to Amazon.com and find it. One thing that really always gets me is that only 4% of pet parents in the population are actually feeding raw diet to their dogs. And I realize that this is all because of big pet food companies' propaganda and the way that they blanketed the industry and given that information that they want us to believe legs, whether they send it off to other veterinarians, or they put it in print, or they actually have it in news, or they have it in commercials, or wherever they have it. It is a blanketed information of misguided information. And I can't stress to all of you the importance of steering clear from it. In a weekly basis, I probably have this conversation with so many people, and one of the hardest things for me is that I'm trying to inform people They ask the question and then they turn away. I really don't want to hear it. And that's a frustration, I'll tell you. That is one of the biggest frustrations out there is you want to do right by everybody, but people don't want to find out that they might not be doing the best they can. So for all of you who are listening, you are trying to do the best you can, and you are doing it. So my best advice is share this information with others, because 4% is such a low number. And with Kimberly having her book and her blog and such positive information, you too could actually help other pet parents. And for that, that's the only way we can actually change the way that this conversation has gone for so many decades. Well, again, thank you, Kimberly. Please, everybody, go to keepthetailwagging.com. You can check it out on Facebook as well. And for that, everybody have a pet-tastic week. Bye-bye, everybody.
Okay, gotta go, it's my bedtime.